The Western Zhou period was the first half of the Zhou dynasty of ancient China. It began when King Wu of Zhou overthrew the Shang dynasty at the Battle of Muya. The dynasty was successful for about 75 years and then slowly lost power. The former Shang lands were divided into hereditary fiefs which became increasingly independent of the king. In 771, the Zhou were driven out of the Wei River Valley. Afterwards, real power was in the hands of the king's nominal vassals. Civil War. Few records survive from this early period, and accounts from the Western Zhou period cover little beyond a list of kings with uncertain dates. King Wu died 2 or 3 years after the conquest. Because his son, King Cheng of Zhou, was young, his brother, the Duke of Zhou, assisted the young and inexperienced king as regent. Wu's other brothers, concerned about the Duke of Zhou's growing power, formed an alliance with other regional rulers and Shang remnants in a rebellion. The Duke of Zhou stamped out this rebellion and conquered more territory to bring other people under Zhou rule. The Duke formulated the Mandate of Heaven doctrine to counter Shang claims to a divine right of rule and founded Luoyang as an eastern capital. With a feudal Fengjian system, royal relatives and generals were given fiefs in the east, including Luoyang, Jin, Ying, Lu, Qi and Yan. While this was designed to maintain Zhou authority as it expanded its rule over a larger amount of territory, many of these became major states when the dynasty weakened. When the Duke of Zhou stepped down as regent, the remainder of Cheng's reign and that of his son King Kang of Zhou seemed to have been peaceful and prosperous. Further kings. The fourth king, King Zhou of Zhou, led an army south against Chu and was killed along with a large part of the Zhou army. The fifth king, King Mu of Zhou, is remembered for his legendary visit to the Queen Mother of the West. Territory was lost to the Zhou in the southeast. The kingdom seems to have weakened during Mu's long reign, possibly because the familial relationship between Zhou kings and regional rulers thinned over generations, so that fiefs that were originally held by royal brothers were now held by third and fourth cousins. Peripheral territories also developed local power and prestige on par with that of the Zhou royal family. The reigns of the next four kings, King Xiao of Zhou, and King Yi of Zhou, are poorly documented. The ninth king is said to have boiled the Duke of Qi in a cauldron, implying that the vassals were no longer obedient. The 10th king, King Li of Zhou, was forced into exile and power was held for 14 years by the Gonghe Regency. Li's overthrow may have been accompanied by China's first recorded peasant rebellion. When Li died in exile, Gonghe retired and power passed to Li's son King Shan of Zhou. King Shan worked to restore royal authority, though regional lords became less obedient later in his reign. The 12th and last king of the Western Zhou period was King Yu of Zhou. When Yu replaced his wife with a concubine, the former queen's powerful father, the Marquis of Shen, joined forces with Quanrong barbarians to sack the western capital of Haojing and kill King Yu in 770 BC. Modern scholars have surmised that the sack of Haojing might have been connected to a Scythian raid from the Altai before their westward expansion. Most of the Zhou nobles withdrew from the Wei River Valley and the capital was re-established downriver at the old eastern capital of Chengzhou near modern-day Luoyang. This was the start of the Eastern Zhou period, which is customarily divided into the spring and autumn period and the Warring States period. It is possible that the Zhou kings derived most of their income from royal lands in the Wei Valley. This would explain the sudden loss of royal power when the Zhou were driven east, but the matter is hard to prove. In recent decades, archaeologists have found a significant number of treasure hoards that were buried in the Wei Valley about the time the Zhou were expelled. This implies that the Zhou nobles were suddenly driven from their homes and hoped to return, but never did. Kings